All right, today I'm putting together a video that talks about mounting vessels. Primarily what I'm talking about is for small vessels with, or really any size vessel with small openings. And I recently put together an article that kind of broached on this topic and went through a lot of the general methods of mounting, but wanted to talk about a specific problem I kind of ran into, and that is I make a lot of hollow forms, and one of the main things I've been trying to do is develop forms that are more proportionate, more pleasing. And so what I think is that they look better when they have smaller openings and smaller bases. So I've been trying to basically work on making forms that have about an opening size of about 10% or so of, let's just say, the overall diameter. So if you have about a 5-inch hollow form in diameter, you're looking at about a 1/2-inch opening. So I do a lot of natural edge vessels, and the main thing that introduced is how do I mount these blanks on here so that I don't mess up the opening. If you're doing finished edge work, then you really don't matter, because whatever you're mounting it with, you can basically turn that off, and it's got a nice cut surface on there anyway. But a natural edge, most of the thing using drive spurt, two-prong drives, multi-prong drives, that sort of thing, they generally leave bigger indentations that are going to mess up where your opening's going to go. So kind of what I'm talking about is that once upon a time I started out doing work on primarily a two-prong drive, and you can see here that this diameter is about an inch and an eighth or something like that. So I can't really use that for natural edge things. They make a smaller one that's the diameter is smaller, but the problem I got into, as you can see on this one, is that I ended up snapping the tip off trying to tweak this down. You see I grinded this down to kind of make sure the opening diameter was smaller, and therefore so that basically didn't work either. Anything that I do that has an opening of, say, 7/8 or larger, I can use my multi-prong drive, because that's going to end up being about 3/4. So I'm in the clear on that. So, but for doing pieces like this is about 5/8 of an opening, I needed to do something different. And what I came up with is kind of more in jam chucking idea. So what I created was I took these PVC couplings and made a jam, which I'm going to compress this blank in with a tailstock. And so some of the pushback I've gotten on, in doing this article was, well, why don't you just do a faceplate or something like that? And so my main reasons is because I don't really use faceplates at all. If I can, I'd try to do my turning where I can get it in a chuck, and then I'm good to go. So looking at an example like this, this is not a really big piece of wood. If you're going to mount with a faceplate, you need a flat, and then you're going to have some extra material that's not going to be usable due to the screws going in and that sort of thing. So while it's very secure, it really limits your flexibility. And on top of that, it's locked in. So you can't, as this thing's up here, you can't move this around to work with the opening contour, or if you see any other features in it, you can't slide this thing around if it's looking like you have a section on here that you want to turn out. So faceplates really kind of limit you and don't give you the flexibility that I'm looking for in terms of going after figure, proportion, the general shape, just all those other things that oftentimes you won't really get into until you start turning. You can kind of see what's behind here. So basically what I've got is I started this off originally doing with a faceplate mounted to a blank, and then I did these series of steps for different size collars on there. And it's basically just a jam fit. So this tenon here is tapered slightly. And you can see right up here, it's kind of the diameter's increasing as I go up here, so it's a compression fit. And I pretty much use this for the vast majority of turnings that I do. I'm doing a lot more smaller pieces and vessels and things like that. So that's just the general idea. This is a PVC coupling. You can get them at any hardware store, and I've glued on a piece of rubber floor mat, and I'm using West Systems epoxy to glue that down, and it holds real well, so I'm pretty happy with that. So part of what I wanted to discuss is, one, mounting this thing, which is pretty straightforward. You just put it up there, go in the, jam the tailstock up to it, and then start off. But in working with this, doing natural edge pieces, there's a few things you want to look out for. So, and primarily in that is that you want your opening, it's just going to be somewhere right in here, because you're going to maximize, ideally right now, not knowing what the wood looks like, sort of this is the greatest area for material to be saved. So ideally I'm looking for an opening somewhere right around here. You want your contour to be relatively parallel to this face, because otherwise if the contour slopes up, you're going to end up with an opening that's going to look more like this. And so what you get is you get kind of this big scoop. You have your opening right here, and then you have this whole area that comes out that basically works with a void. I don't find this as nice as if this opening here was a little bit flatter, and then this, if that was the case, and this wood would have sealed up and more of this material, so you would have had more of the traditional opening right here and not so much of that. I don't find that this shape to be as nice looking, so that's one of the things I kind of figured out as I went through this. I just kind of put wood up there and went at it. The other thing is, if you end up with this, you have a lot more area up top where the balance gets off. So if you're doing smaller bases too, and you do things with voids and that sort of thing, your hollow could now basically be off balance, and you can spend all this time and you can put it on there and it just falls over. So ideally what we're looking for is something that seals mostly all the way around. And we'll look at this one here. So this is primarily what I'm talking about. So we have a continuous wood all the way around. I don't mind little voids and things like that, but I'm trying to avoid these big, dips and that sort of thing, if you can help it. All right, so let's talk about something else here. Oftentimes, particularly if you're doing burls, which everybody's after, and you're doing natural edge things. Another thing that I do when I mount these things is I have another, it's basically a throwaway disc. It's the diameter of this collar here. And all this is intended to do is just give you another layer. So all of these, particularly on burls, that all these edges that come up, they can really tear this surface up as you're going. So all this is really intended to do is to protect this edge here, so I don't have to keep making new material and keep gluing that on and that sort of thing. So every time that I go to mount a blank up there, I always use one of these as well. So What I'm looking at is I start out here, I look at these, and like I was saying, I'm kind of going for the biggest area that I think is usable right now. There's nothing really on the outside here. You know, some of this zone over here looks pretty spalted. It may not be any good. So I'm expecting that more of this material needs to get turned out. And this looks more solid over here. So I'm going to use this as a reference to position, since this is about the same diameter as this. Any material that's on the outside of this is probably going to get turned away. And this is one of these things I was talking about. You know, if you have it just on a faceplate, you know, you may not get the opportunity to turn that away as you're going if something pops up. So two things I'm looking at. I want kind of a relatively flat area. I'm expecting the opening to be somewhere in here. Right now I'm looking at, I want to turn this extra material away over here. And so it gives me, this is the general place of where I think would be good to turn it. So the next thing you want to look at is you get this up here and you check over here on this to make sure that it's seated firm against this shoulder. Doing these natural edge things, particularly on a shape like this where this is not a flat right at the base, it may kind of cause this thing to cant over a little bit and you can have it coming off there. So that's in right there. The next thing, you know, you kind of have to look at and be aware of is that when you're turning is body position and where you're going to position yourself. In doing this, you don't want to be right in the direction of rotation, because sometimes these things do pop off, particularly on a shape like this, because this is not a flat. I'm only gripping just on one edge and the point. So I'm going to start real slow and going at this. If you're standing right here, right in the line of fire, this thing pops out, you're going to end up with this thing right in your face. So when you turn, I'm standing over here. The tool rest is going to be right here, and I'm basically behind that. So if this thing pops off, it's going that way, and I'm not standing right in front of it. And really, any time that you're starting to rough out a blank, this is where you should be sitting, you know, standing. And if you're coming at it from this direction, your body should be over here, not in the general line of rotation. Another one of these things that's less obvious that I kind of found out as I started making these things is thinking about how you're going to remount after you rough this thing, you turn a tenon on it, and then you get it into your chuck, you make your shapes, and you do your hollowing. And then when you go down and you want to turn the base off, the way I do it is I have a series of cup jams, and I basically do something like this all over again. Cup jam holds it right into position. Now, the thing is that right from the get-go, and this is why you're thinking about this, you're already establishing essentially your center point that you're going to reuse when you go to mount it to turn the bottom off. I have a swiveling headstock, and when I hollow, I turn this thing out. And so you have to basically put this back between centers when you're going to turn the bottom off. So I have to reposition this thing. And so a lot of times, you know, you want your vessel to turn true so everything's smooth and you don't have any of this mismatches when you're turning the bottom off. So here's kind of the less obvious thing is that any sort of shape or anything on this that's not, say, parallel to this face, even if it's over a little bit, is going to cause your vessel to not turn true when you go to turn the bottom. So what I'm doing is that when I get this thing basically with some rough shape on it, I'm going to turn this down, and I'm then either, if I have the material to do so, to cut a flat, reposition it so I'm in contact all the way around so this thing's secure. Or if this thing will hold well enough and it's not a big piece, I'll rough it, I'll turn my tenon on it, and then before I go to mount it back in there, I'll take a chisel and then I'll flatten this this face off. I don't want to take so much off that I'll lose my center point, because you're going to need that. But that's something that you want to kind of keep in mind thinking about right now.